Fuck! What the hell? That was weird. Oh, shit! What in the hell is... What is going on? What in the hell is... Hello? Okay. This is getting pretty ridiculous. Justin! Justin, Detective Pikachu amiibo! Stop! Oh, finally. Oh my god. Oh, god damn it!
Have you ever wanted to be transported into a magical, fantasy-based world so badly to the point where you'd pretty much accept any offer made to you despite the possible consequences involved? Well, if you're a giant nerd like me who would click yes without even thinking to read the terms and conditions that sign your life away, then boy does the popular Isekai anime Re:Zero, starting life in another world, showcase your fantasy dream come true scenario. Maybe? Returning back to the days of 2012 when series creator Tappei Nagasuki released this fantasy-based story on the web, it quickly picked up traction for its darker glimpse into the usually more lighthearted isekai genre, to the point where it got officially licensed not long after its conception with Shinichiro Otsuka on board illustrating the series, which meant it wouldn't be that long at all before Studio White Fox would jump on the chance to adapt this fresh new isekai series ripe for the picking. And in April of 2016, this anime adaptation transported a whopping 50-minute introduction into its fantasy world and quickly made the community eager to return to it. The story follows the seemingly ordinary shut-in Natsuki Subaru, leaving his local mini-mart when in a blink of an eye he is standing in the middle of a huge bustling city completely different from the real world, which for an isekai is the simplest transportation to another world I have ever seen. After stumbling around trying to make sense of what his newfound purpose must be in this world, he quickly discovers that crime is still very prevalent even here, as thugs still like to hang out in alleyways. But in a true hero's fashion, the silver-haired beauty Emilia comes to his rescue despite being on a mission of her own. Indebted to his savior, Subaru joins Emilia in tracking down a thief who stole from her previously, and as they get to know each other, he starts to feel a little at home in this world. That is, until their journey leads them both to be struck down in a cruel twist of fate. But when time resets itself to Subaru still standing before any of those events occurred, the true journey he's about to embark on begins to unfold. The fantasy genre can be crafted with so many different elements that will make most stories stand out on their own already, but what makes them truly memorable is the inhabitants of the world we are exploring, and in this anime's 25-episode run, you better believe we have quite the ensemble of characters that truly define the world of Re:Zero as the popular isekai that it is, and for Subaru to learn more about the land from. No magical sort of story would be complete without a cute mascot character accompanying the main heroine. In this case, that would be Puck, the adorable cat spirit who's bound to Emilia's side and vows to protect her with his powerful spellcasting abilities. But even a spirit guard can sometimes be oblivious when it comes to the swiftness of a skilled thief like Felt, a rebellious soul born from the slums of the city who wants to escape from the clutches of poverty by selling stolen items with the help from Old Man Rom, the only man she considers family for his wisdom and caring attitude towards helping her follow her dream. Obviously, stealing would still be a big no-no even in a fantasy world such as this one, so having strong, noble knights like Reinhard maintaining the peace in a calm but firm sort of fashion is the most rational way enforcement of the law should be maintained. Of course, one central government would be the only thing maintaining the huge dragon kingdom of Lagunica, as villages are often protected in territories governed by powerful lords such as Roswell. Hang on a tick. such as Lord Roswell, an eccentric ruler who's regarded highly for his powerful spellcasting abilities, dwarfing most in comparison. Having such magical prowess does make you a prime target for stealing information if someone was gutsy enough to mess with a guy who can fly, but it's best to be on the safer side by having another powerful spellcaster such as Beatrice guard your most treasured secrets. After all, her no-nonsense way of speaking can throw most people off before she sends them packing. But even being so magically inclined, maintaining such a huge estate would only be possible with the help from hard workers such as the twin sisters Ram and Rem. While similar in appearance, their distinct differences in personalities make for a perfect team when it comes to serving their lord, and overall being good hosts when they aren't having to defend the manor from any uninvited guests. When you create a title for an isekai series that includes a phrase so on the nose like starting life in another world, you're pretty much expected to emulate that exact starting over in a new place kind of feeling, not only for the main character, but the viewer as well. And thankfully, that's exactly what you get when you're experiencing the fantasy-based kingdom of Lagunica through the eyes of Subaru. During the opening minutes of your time spent in this massive market district, you get quite a few glimpses of what life is like in this new foreign world that are pretty common elements in a fantasy setting, such as demi-humans walking the streets, knights being law enforcement, carriage drawing ground dragons instead of horses. But it's shortly later in the series you really start to see how fleshed out the inner workings of this world are compared to a simple, you're the hero now, go on this quest right away kind of plot. Take the significance of the royal insignia, for example. It's a special trinket that signifies you are qualified to be in the running for the next king of all of Lagunica after the royal family had passed, which sounds pretty straightforward, but we get a deep dive into why that role is so important for the future of the nation, as this role is the only one who can interact with the legendary dragon that helped seal away the dreadful jealous witch Satella many years prior. This is a very important role that could potentially change the entire way of life for the entire nation depending on who is elected and what the dragon wants. But we actually learn the historical importance of this event through literal learning experiences, with Subaru learning to read and write the proper text of the world. I know this seems like a small thing to be really impressed by compared to all the magical aspects that make this world a fantasy lover's dream, which I completely agree with that statement, but you just gotta appreciate taking the time to actually connect the learning aspect of this new life to the bare basics instead of assuming things will just be catered to you. It makes this big fantasy world seem a bit more realistic with the isekai tropes while still 100% embracing what makes the fantasy genre so popular. Only in a fantasy world would the economic demand for apples be thriving. Like seriously, I want to read this spin-off about this guy's appa selling days rather than focus on our real-world economy. Spellcasting is almost a must-have element when it comes to most fantasy stories, so it's no surprise right from the get-go we get treated to how creative magic can be utilized for combat and protection purposes, that picking up a few of your own would be essential for a main character to have in this world, but in actuality, Subaru was gifted a very unique one all to himself from the moment he took his first breath in this world that he bluntly named Return by Death, although was cursed with might be what he feels instead of gifted. As the name implies, it's a simple ability that allows Subaru to go back to a previous point in time as long as he fulfills the proper requirement: dying. This technique is essentially a double-edged sword of irony where it can be very useful for resetting in order to prevent possible harm to yourself or people you care about at the cost of lethal harm being done to you to activate it, which makes it a special ability that I feel most people wouldn't want to ever utilize, but not in this main character's case. You see, Natsuki Subaru teeters between the fine line of being not very likable to very admirable with his time spent in this world, which can be attributed to his unique skill being mixed with his arrogant but well-meaning neat kind of personality. I do love how his attitude after only a couple minutes of being in a whole new world completely matches how any normal nerd would react in this kind of situation, basically being like, "Fucking finally!" And while his automatic assumptions that he was summoned here to be a badass hero and his knowledge of anime and gaming will be his little cheat sheet to the world does get a little old after a while, it does lead to some great comedic moments that poke the perfect amount of fun at the typical isekai tropes and shows how resourceful some real-world knowledge could be in this environment. But what makes Subaru, in my opinion, the most admirable is his determination to save others instead of himself, despite being well aware he is less than an average Joe in this world when it comes to fighting capabilities, which in my opinion makes him the best kind of character to have a darker themed ability like Return by Death, because it casts a much darker overtone to every move he makes along with the series in general, which is especially refreshing for an isekai these days by emphasizing that this is not some unbelievable badass protagonist who can solve everything in the blink of an eye, but because he accepts that aspect about himself, he tries very hard to succeed with what he has, even if it means he'll have to accept the consequences of having to start over so he can try again differently. differently, which tenacity like that is very respectable for someone to have when it comes to caring for others. Although his practically immediate feelings for Emilia being that strong, I can only understand so much. Like, he was a shut-in who was rescued by a magic-wielding beauty, yeah, but I can't relate to that head-over-heels feeling without learning much about the person first. Oh shit. I think I'm in love! Speaking of being motivated by feelings alone, Subaru's story wouldn't have progressed very much at the start if it wasn't for the main heroine Emilia unintentionally enchanting him when she graced his life in the form of a chill rescue, giving the poor boy a purpose in this fantasy world. If you couldn't tell from a first glance, Emilia is a half-elf who is capable of using ice-based magic along with able to communicate with spirits if her fluffy sidekick wasn't an obvious giveaway, which definitely drives home the fantasy aspect of her character that you would come to expect from a world like this. And while all this makes her a very memorable character right off the bat, a lot of the non-fantasy aspects of her character stood out the most to me for what made her such an appealing heroine in this series. Admittedly, from the start, she comes off a bit cold towards strangers despite already letting some of her caring nature show when it comes to helping people, but that makes a lot of sense when you learn about the discriminatory nature this world has towards half-elves thanks to the witch Satella being one. And Emilia has it even worse because of the uncanny resemblance the two share, so most people just outright dislike her without giving the chance to know her, which is really unfortunate because you quickly come to see how sweet and selfless her nature actually is when it comes to being a good person who wants the best for the people she can help without asking for anything in return, a truly heroic trait that is uncommon in most people. If anything, she could possibly be too good-natured at times, especially when it comes to not understanding certain terminology from Subaru, but still going along with it anyway because of the faith she eventually places in him, and you can't just help but actually smile along with Subaru when that sweet side of her shows despite her being embarrassed by it. But unfortunately for her character development, by the time we reach the end of this anime's run, we know a lot about her personality and motivations, but her own personal story with the royal election we didn't get to see much of other than she's participating, which is a shame because that whole aspect is very interesting to me, and it would be nice to know more of her own personal history as we don't really hear about the other half-elves besides her and Satella. Why is that? However, I guess considering all the stuff we do learn about her and how much of a great character she is in the realm of fantasy with her good-natured heart, I guess I can understand why Subaru would be smitten so fast with her. Hell, with his fanboy-like personality, I bet he'd be the first person to open an Amelia fan club if he— well, I'll be damned, he did it already. Now, at the risk of sounding like a broken Subaru repeating the same thing over and over, I would like to take a short amount of time addressing the best girl debates I witnessed online while this series was first airing between the two flagship characters Emilia and Rem. As I mentioned before in my Darling review, I find it a bit ridiculous how some people can lash out with so much hate and negativity when it comes to debating who is best between two fictional characters, when it's quite possible to have normal, reasonable discussions without the need for trading insults or threats. But boy, did these arguments escalate whenever defending Emilia came into conversation. Whether you are defending why you adore Emilia for her more selfless and caring nature, or stand by Rem for her fierce but loving dedication she provides in the series, at the end of the day, what you say is just an opinion, and clearly both are great characters for different reasons, so why not just appreciate them both for who they are? Again, this is a much bigger topic for another day, so I'll end this with a pretty simple request of please just be kind to one another. Before I can really crack open more specifics about the story and how this girl right here captured my heart, I have to trigger the good old spoiler warning here, and the timestamp you can skip to in order to avoid spoiling plot points, and so I can continue on with this review without the fear of the jealous witch plaguing me for ruining someone's blind experience with the show. While the main heroine unfortunately doesn't get a whole lot of character development throughout your time spent with this anime, a certain pair of twins stepped into the spotlight, stealing a good amount of the show and the hearts of the community without even sending a proper calling card, and it's quite easy to understand why once you learn the backstory behind the maid sisters Ram and Rem. Besides the adorable appearances and cute rhyming phrases they portray when you first meet them, you quickly learn how different each of their personalities are through them teaching Subaru how to properly work in the Roswell mansion, like how Rem is the shy, hard-working type that has to pick up the slack for her older sister at times, while Ram is still a dedicated worker but portrays more confidence while giving off sarcastic tones that is just comedy gold at times, especially when she playfully mocks Basaru, and I can't help but smile at these moments as they remind me a lot of how my friends and I hang out together. Do I have bad friends? But personality traits aside, these two share a complex family history that set up this current dynamic between them, as you come to find out they're actually twin Oni, a race of horned demi-humans gifted with powerful strength and magic capabilities, but also believe heavily in self-strength being the only way of living, so twins like this were considered to be worthless. However, when Ram showed incredible promise protecting the two, they were accepted in the village and were raised like normal Oni. Ram's magical potential cast quite the shadow on Rem, who was struggling to keep up with her sister, to the point when Ram lost her horn protecting her sister from the witch's cult. Rem's immediate thoughts were of joy at the idea of it being gone, causing an inferiority complex to be born within her heart for years to come and affecting how she acts with her sister. It wasn't until much later, when Rem's Oni power spiraled out of control from her hesitation to protect Subaru from mob beasts and her newfound desperation to atone for what she felt she caused with his curse, that she had her first smack of reality in the form of Subaru risking his life to protect her, which admittedly was a pretty cool stance for Subaru to take here. It was after this event where the guilt-ridden Rem is told for the first time to live for herself. She is so much more than her sister's shadow and deserves to be happy with everything she can accomplish, which is a great reminder of self-love, but also one of the purest scenes I have seen when she starts laughing and tearing up that honestly I should have it framed on my desk to remind myself to be proud of myself whenever I'm feeling down. Like seriously, I would be unstoppable with her as a motivator. With the mob beast incident wrapped up, it's time for Emilia's story to advance when it comes time for all the candidates participating in the royal selection to gather in the capital for an important event that will finally set the process into motion, so naturally Basaru must screw it up somehow. Now, before you're quick to judge me for saying that, he did originally promise Emilia he'd wait until she returned from this event, but broke this promise thinking he needs to protect her at all times and showed up with a rival candidate he helped prior. Genius. It's here where we officially meet everyone in the running besides Emilia, like the sadistic acting Priscilla, whom Subaru arrived with earlier, the obsessed with riches Anastasia, the strong, collected leader type Krush, and the newly revealed as a candidate who doesn't want to be there, Felt from earlier in the story, which makes for quite the diverse cast, all competing for the crown that definitely makes things more interesting. This is also where we see firsthand how discriminatory the world acts towards Emilia due to her half-elf heritage, and how most people despise the fact that she's even running, which of course makes Subaru quite angry and feel the need he has to defend her honor in front of the entire room and make a sweeping declaration that he is her official knight since no one else is, but every other candidate has one. Besides angering the official knights there, like the noble Julius who outright calls Subaru out for his lack of care when making such claims, he also causes Emilia such embarrassment and grief, which leads him deservingly to be kicked out of the room. This wouldn't be the end of things though, as Subaru must continue to escalate things by accepting a challenge from Julius that ends up in a very brutal one-sided fight that honestly I would say was undeserved if Subaru would have just given up. After all this, Emilia asks an honest question of why is she treated in such high regard by Subaru, to which he claims is because of how she saved him, but that doesn't make sense to her since in this timeline those events didn't happen, and even though Subaru desperately wants to explain his power to her, the feeling shrouding him every time makes him start to act in a frenzied kind of manner, speaking about all the things he does for her and how much she owes him for everything, leading to Emilia ending their friendship as a result. And regardless of how you feel about Subaru at this point, the anguish he expresses during his pain and desperation, you do sympathize with him a bit, because clearly the mental toll his ability has taken is just as bad as the physical and not something anyone should have to go through. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of all the sorrow that's going to kick off in the second act of Subaru's emotional journey. Brace yourselves, folks, it's gonna be a bumpy ride. Emilia may be out of the picture while Subaru remains in the city to be healed by best catboy Felix. That doesn't mean that her life isn't at risk, as now that the election has begun, so is the plans of the infamous cult of the witch Satella, and despite being able to foresee the attack coming thanks to Rem, reaching the mansion leads only to a bloody path of bodies of villagers, cultists, and friends alike. Once dying resets him back to right before they learned of the attack, despair has already sunk deep into his mind to the point where Rem tries to bring Subaru back home anyway without the knowledge of the attack, and a surprise ambush from the cult leads Subaru to meet the disturbingly self-destructive Betelgeuse, a loyal follower who recognizes the witch's love shrouding Subaru, which I must say the whole creepy nature behind this character is a good example of how well this series can paint unsettling imagery. Like, show this to anyone who has a bad habit of chewing their nails, this will get them to stop, guaranteed. Luckily, Rem's devotion to Subaru leads her to find him here and launch a rescue operation that... Hello, 911? I'd like to report a robbery. Yeah, the anime ReZero stolen all the happiness from my heart! Seriously, this scene broke my heart to watch, and him just walking with her in his arms back to the manor to see it in ruins yet again was just so sad to see. But also leads to a chilling shot of a mysterious beast decapitating him like it was nothing that honestly was a very great way to end an episode that was filled with such despairful feelings. Resetting once again with more knowledge in hand, he seeks out help from the other candidates in order to wipe out the cult for revenge, but not in the same selfless way of wanting to protect Emilia that Krush calls him out on, thus starting a long list of no's along his journey. And even when it seemed like he was finally getting somewhere, one big ass whale attack that causes Rem to vanish from existence and unintentionally killing Emilia by finally revealing his power undoes all of that, and it really seems like all hope is lost no matter what Subaru tries, as Puck, who is the mysterious beast from before, ends Subaru's life once more. Honestly, at this point I'm right with Subaru with feeling despair here, as these past few episodes were the definition of suffering alongside the protagonist, that it took me actually having to convince a friend of mine to keep going with the series after this point because of how sad they were feeling. Not because I'm a bad friend obviously, but because episode 18 follows right after these events and in my opinion makes everything we just went through completely worth it. After resetting once again, Subaru doesn't want to waste any time, so he grabs Rem and asks her to run away as far from this nation as possible so they can start a brand new life together free from the potential risks looming ahead of them, which at this point I don't really blame him for thinking this way. But that's where the beauty of this episode kicks in, as Rem begins to openly talk about how she has fantasized about this sort of scenario in her head multiple times, which is really cute to me, and as happy as it would make her, she knows it's not what he truly wants deep down in his heart. The conversation that follows carries so much weight behind it with every transition that follows each back and forth argument presented, from the dreadfully despairing intensity behind Subaru claiming he is powerless to do anything and that he accepts the fact that he is worthless, to the beautifully framed counter arguments of Rem emotionally claiming that the Subaru she knows is not at all like that and is capable of so many great things, and that's who she loves more than anything in the world. The words that follow after Rem exclaims that she loves Subaru are some of the most touching I've ever heard in an isekai kind of story, and perfectly completes one of the most heartwarming scenes I've seen in recent anime, while also creatively tying into the title of the episode, From Zero, by having her words of starting from zero strike a chord within Subaru that renews his faith and drives him to want to reset himself as a hero, and matches the theming of starting over from nothing that the series has been portraying. This is a beautiful example of no matter how hard you fall, there are always people out there that see past the darkness for you and can help lift you back up when you feel like you can't walk anymore. And this episode was able to convey this during almost all of its runtime, which is outstanding for a fantasy series to be this engaging from one conversation alone, and I can't find a single thing wrong with
俺はエミリアが好きだ。
faith restored and me actually happy to see Subaru back to his old self. It's time for him to act like the hero he wants to be in the eyes of Rem by going to save Emilia, this time for sure. But first, he gotta kill that whale. Yes, the whale I mentioned earlier is actually pretty important in his quest to save everyone in Roswell's domain, as it blocks the quickest route there, so using his renewed confidence and his knowledge from his previous attempts, he manages to strike a deal between the other candidates Krush and Anesthesia for their help in taking out the whale using this information Subaru has, if they can get a cut of the mining rights from Roswell's domain. Which may seem like the risks outweigh the rewards here, but Subaru pointing out that he's aware of Krush already wanting to take down the whale, negotiations are agreed upon in the interest of everyone. Way to go, Subaru! You even got Wilhelm's respect and gratitude for this exchange. With everything set in motion to prepare for the all-scale battle against the white whale, we do learn more about the history of the land through this giant mob beast's previous encounters, including claiming the life of the previous legendary swordsman and wife of Wilhelm himself, turning this into a quest of vengeance for him rather than a righteous crusade, which isn't a bad thing as a lot of people involved feel the same way. These passionate emotions are brought into the full-scale assault on the whale, as we see badass swordsmanship from both Wilhelm and Krush following the charge led by Subaru and Rem, while the rest of the attack party strikes blow after blow onto the whale with some of the best action sequences we have seen so far. But of course, this wouldn't be a one-sided kind of battle for either side, as this whale showcases creative tactics of its own in the form of a fog that erases your existence once you're dead, whales of insanity, and even duplication once it feels like it's in danger. There is so much happening in this battle, but you follow every step of it from each plan being carried out, and and you are constantly reminded about the stakes at hand when we get glimpses into the backstory of Wilhelm and his bride-to-be Theresia, which the sweetness shown from their love further drives the impact from each of his strikes in this battle, and we're treated to some absurdly awesome action sequences. Even with Wilhelm and Crush stealing the show with their awesome combat capabilities, Subaru still gets his own epic heroic moment where he uses himself as bait in order to drag the real Will down for the final series of blows, bringing the battle to a close and him regarded as the hero who made this all possible, which is something us nerds can only dream of doing being here in the real world, and I feel proud of how far Subaru has come. Even though I hate him. Finally, after all the struggles to get to this point and the proper amount of allies now by his side, including the help from Julie, it's finally time to take down Betelgeuse and the witches cult once and for all. Although it's bullshit Rem had to be left behind for the remainder of the series, like come on! Before the insanity of what's about to unfold comes to pass, we even get a somewhat nice moment between Subaru and Julius where they apologize for the actions they took towards each other, which shows that Subaru really is growing as a character and these two can work together for a common goal. After following through with a surprise ambush against Betelgeuse that rightfully makes him extra crispy in his demise, we see what looks like victory being within reach against the cult members as they have been able to take them down and begin evacuation plans after clearing up a miscommunication with Ram. That is until a cultist spy helps launch a surprise attack of their own and Betelgeuse has possessed other members that can also use his unseen hand ability. Damn it! But not all hope is lost as Emilia herself finally makes a proper return to the series in her own heroic way of taking down the last cult member and hopefully seeming like a hero in the eyes of the village instead of an evil witch counterpart. Unfortunately, we have one last moment of suffering strike Subaru as it turns out thanks to his cursed connection to the witch, he gets possessed by Betelgeuse and the only way to undo it is for him to be killed one final time. With time being reset once again, they follow through with the same plan of evacuation, but this time taking down all the cultists in the area beforehand and having Emilia flee from the start, leaving the unlikely perfect team up of Julius using Subaru's curse as a way to see past Betelgeuse's attacks and use his sword arts to strike him down, which truly shows how far these two have come from disliking one another to actually becoming friends, which was another nice moment to finally see. But not as nice as seeing the spirit of Satella reject Betelgeuse when attempting to possess Subaru's body. Yeah, this guy! The witch's cult is finally no longer a threat, and this should be a time to breathe, but nope. That cultist spy who kicked things off previously? Yeah, they forgot to remove his explosives from the cart Emilia and the kids happened to be on. Brilliant! Well, thanks to the unexpected appearance from Otto, you know, the guy who previously tried to sacrifice Subaru to the whale to save his own skin, was luckily found tied up after apparently being imprisoned by the cult prior, and not one to hold a grudge anymore, Subaru barters with him in order to ride with him to catch up to Emilia's carriage. What a guy. But the thing that will haunt my nightmares every night this week surfaces in the form of a grotesque-looking Betelgeuse making one final attempt at Subaru's life in a climactic chase sequence that wouldn't make this a final episode without it. Thanks to the borrowed spirit from Julius and tricking the still human side of his enemy, Betelgeuse is vanquished finally in a dramatic sense of irony as his love for the witch is what leads him to his demise. And finally, Subaru reunites with Emilia and professes his love to her right before delivering the final act of saving her life in a Hail Mary attempt to get those explosives as far away as possible. After all this, we are finally graced with the true reunion between Subaru and Emilia that has been a very long time coming, and it's here where both characters finally get the emotional closure they have been seeking ever since they split up from what felt like forever ago. Emilia, still not fully understanding why she is deserving of all of his efforts, apologizes for reacting as badly as she did, but in a big moment of self-growth, Subaru owns to his own arrogance that resulted in the whole thing being his fault, and should have properly explained all the reasons why he was in love with her instead of saying it was because she saved him previously. He goes on to explain every little thing he loves about her despite what the world may think of her heritage and vows that he will never leave her side because of how much he cares about her and wants to be the hero that saves her always because of the love he feels for her even if she hasn't ever saved him in this life. And by saying all these things actually truly saves Emilia's spirit from being drowned in the darkness that the world has casted upon her, delivering a truly tender moment of pure happiness spilling out from her as she thanks Subaru from the very bottom of her heart. We are left with unspoken words by the final seconds playing out that does leave us wondering a little bit, but all in all, this was a very touching ending for the characters, especially with how shattering the scenes of them splitting up was for them and the steep mountain climb of hardship Subaru had to get through for the sake of himself and the girl he truly loves, which the reward of him getting to rest his weary head in the lap of the beautiful girl he admires so deeply is truly truly the true happy ending route no matter who you are or what kind of nerd you may be. In a true light novel anime adaptation, however, I can't help but feel bummed about all the big unanswered questions and plot threads we didn't get to see played out. Like, why was Subaru cursed with this ability from who we can only assume was Satella in the first place, because that didn't have very much light shed on it? Or how is the rest of the royal election going to play out in terms of actually choosing the next king? But knowing the track record of these kinds of adaptations seemingly getting lost to time, especially with its more than average season length, I don't think Re:Zero will be returning by death. Holy shit, they are actually making a season 2! We got a trailer! Yeah, baby, let me suffer all over again! Let's take a page straight from Subaru's cursed book and return all the way back to the introductory shots from the first episode, where we see fast, dynamic shots jumping us straight into the heart of fantasy blended with reality, which is a craft Studio White Fox has really perfected over the years when setting its high standard for animation quality. We are treated to superb visual sequences when it comes to utilizing fantasy elements that are common in these kinds of stories, such as the glow emanating from the tiny spirits dancing around the screen, giving off a sense of warmth in contrast to the surrounding area, or the extra hint of detail when it comes to the ice magic having an extra amount of shine added to it after being casted, and you see the cold slowly drifting off the pretty crystals. Which also leads into really well choreographed combat segments combined with the use of magic coming from users like Emilia with her ice projectiles being highly detailed just like the movement it takes to dodge them, and the raw intensity being expressed from delivering devastating blows are perfectly captured with the visuals on screen, especially when the character expresses all sorts of emotions in the middle of combat, matching the feelings that the tone is calling for. Speaking of feelings, this may sound odd for an Isekai series, but that's where I think the studio truly delivered the most peak animation in this adaptation, as the scenes where we see Subaru feeling the dreadful atmosphere of the environment or situation he is in is beautifully expressed with facial expressions of pain and anguish, which yes sounds a bit sadistic, but if an animation can make the viewer feel the same heart-wrenching suffering its characters show on screen, while at the same time be able to have moments where its characters can make you laugh or cry tears of joy with beautiful visuals, that's when you have a memorable series on your hands. Heck, even the CG wasn't too bad. Could have looked a bit better, sure, but it wasn't around on screen long enough to really affect the impact of the scenes, so still top-notch quality in my eyes. It wasn't until after the first episode where we got treated to the first OP of the series, and boy did this one perfectly capture what we were in for. Redo by singer Konami Suzuki beautifully vocalizes a chilling kind of vibe as the visuals dance around the screen unsteadily when going through the cast of characters, and as the song title suggests, ramps up in tempo as Subaru is taken aback from an alternate timeline version of himself retrying after a failed attempt that all stemmed from him being brutally murdered, and having it all rewind to the beginning to signify that this will be a repeating cycle throughout the story. Honestly, this whole OP supports my suggested title for the series a lot more than its current one, Re:Zero, Weekend at Suffering! The second OP, Paradisus Paradoxum by pop rock band Myth and Royd, portrays more of the story aspects of this fantasy world with more upbeat tempos and vocals accompanying the introductory shots, and perfectly strikes the feeling of adventure when we see Subaru and Rem riding off on a ground dragon that transitions into a more battle-driven scene which conveys a great amount of intrigue without giving away too much of the second core. Both the ending themes were also performed by Myth and Royd, with the first being more centered around the concept of beauty being found in the dark as snowflakes fall around the cast of characters with vocals matching the ambiance until the desperation of saving Emilia is shown, which also matches the theming found in the other ending where we see Emilia's day-to-day life drawn in a cutesy art style with the people she cares about scrolling through the screen, hinting at the loneliness she feels being overtaken by the important people in her life. The soundtrack of this series was filled with many tracks that captured the excitement of exploring a mysterious new world and possible wonders yet to be seen, while on the other hand of the spectrum creating chilling, atmospheric tracks that are forever associated with the woes of the cast, particularly Subaru with the Call of the Witch track. Seriously, it's iconically chilling every time you hear it. My only experience with the series is through the sub version where we got treated to a superb voice cast with Yusuke Kobayashi achieving victory in portraying the overly confident Subaru and his neatish behavior, while perfectly contrasting with the more innocently but good-hearted charm from Emilia's voice actress Rie Takahashi, and the absolute stellar performance comments from the shyly sweet to unstable battle shouting styles from Rem's voice actress Inori Manase, representing some of the great voice work found in the series. Overall, this was a series that I first got into because of a friend's recommendation after I believe only the first few episodes were out at the time, and I was at a point in my life where I was starting a new job, so I wasn't really watching a whole lot of anime at the current time. So I told myself, okay, I'll watch the first episode before drifting off to sleep, unaware of it being split into 2 parts because of its length. And once part B was finished, I said, shit, I gotta keep going, because I'm a sucker for darker stories, and I didn't know that's where it was going in a pleasantly surprised way. This isekai managed to build an entirely unique identity off the current staples we already knew from the genre, while finding a healthy balance between feeling joy of a whole new fantasy world and the moments where you want to cry yourself to sleep at night from how dark it got with its story, which the second core definitely leads more towards that side of the spectrum, but that's the beauty of ReZero. It can lift you up and bring you down so easily like a flip of a coin that you're on the edge of your seat every step of this fantasy-based journey, and that's something you want out of a story you're going to be spending your time with, even if it has a protagonist like Subaru. I give ReZero Starting Life in Another World 9 fresh appas out of 10. And I highly recommend the isekai lovers out there who might be looking for a more darker themed story to give it a shot, or if you just love good fantasy elements mixed with some memorable characters you will end up caring about very quickly into the series, I think this will be an anime you will be turning back to many times after your first watch through. Hell, I know I am right before season 2 comes around, but hey, we also got the light novels to read if you want to be ahead of the game. As always guys, thank you so much for watching this pretty in-depth review all the way to the end. This was a series I wanted to tackle in a video format even before I started this channel, but I knew it would probably end up being a long one since it is ReZero, so I wanted to wait a while before doing it, but when the stars aligned with that Sun in Season 2 teaser dropping right when I was making plans for my own second season of this channel, I knew it was time to cover my favorite isekai series. I just love dark stories, okay? You saw me talk about Goblin Slayer. However, I would also like to apologize for the lack of context on why there was an extra month-long gap for this video. I decided to take my birthday month off from making content since so many life events kept piling up, but if you follow me on my Twitter 8bit Tata Nerd, you'll be in the loop if a delay like this happens again in the future, because you never really know what life will throw at you. But if you enjoyed this brand new review, helping Emilia cast up that like button spell would be a great help to her along with the channel, and if you're wanting to keep up to date with any future series or topics I may discuss directly, smacking on that subscribe button would be the best way to make sure you don't miss out on the next series I'm transported to. Seriously, I've been sleeping on a lot of newer isekai series, so I'm pretty sure I'll be talking about more in the future. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think it's best I just leave the house to escape this hellish morning.